Okay, thank you very much, Alexandra and Olena, for your presentations, and I will be very happy to follow up. So you will not be very surprised when I quote some of the facts and figures and images that you've already showed. However, my idea is to go one step back, and I'd like to present some ways some ways in which we try to understand what's going on. And what we are trying to do in Pop Rebel Team in Krakow is that we're trying to focus on some symbolic strategies that stand behind and that give meaning to the politics of peace and of populism. And therefore, today I'd like to share some ideas and concepts that we have that help us to understand not only what's going on, but also what kind of strategies are applied and are constructed in order to make the people feel that they have the meaning of life and so on. So we're going to have a look at some very general thoughts, and I'd like to present some more specific cases. And basically, this is going to be a presentation of what we are looking at. And let me start with four theses or four ideas that we're looking at here. And I would like to start with a very general sentence that I once heard, and it somehow contextualizes everything that I'm going to talk about. And the sentence would be that no one has ever direct and non-intermediate experience of life, which means that we all are somehow intermediated by culture, and we all somehow live with the use of the matrices that are provided to us by culture and also by politics. So what we are looking at now is a question of mutual relations between the Polish state and the Catholic Church in Poland. And because as we all know, and as we've seen, and as you have wonderfully demonstrated, Olena and Alexandra, in your presentations, the relationship or the connection or the marriage or the correspondence is very, very strong. So the main question would be, why is it so strong? What makes it so strong? And how is it possible at all to make it so strong that basically these two orders are, and this is the first statement or the hypothesis, that the religion represented by the Catholic Church and the national state who have so many connections, well, the main reason for the effectiveness of their marriage is that they have mutual legitimization, which means that each of them strengthens the other. And we're going to have a look at how it happens, or at least what we think about this process. So in order to share and to establish that mutual legitimization, there needs to be a common vision. And we'd like to argue that this common vision of social world and of a human, of an individual, is basically very much a more symbolic way of structuring the diversity of everyday experiences, which is something that I try to start with. So in other words, we'd like to argue that populism provides very specific ways of interpretation of everyday experiences and of the social world, rather than specific facts, figures, and it's not only about ideology. It's about ways of understanding and ways of structuring the experiences of the people. which is where I come to the central term of the people. We might find also that the nation or national state is a central term and a central concept for the marriage of the church and the Polish state. And the final or the ultimate goal of this link, of this connection between the church and the state would be to sacralize the nation as a concept. And this concept would be something that would be the main reference framework for identity construction, most of all, but also the kind of resources that provide the sense of belonging for the people again. And then finally, this idea of structuring the diversity of everyday life would be seen as something complete, which means that all the world, all the social world, and all the everyday experiences are in a way explained and interpreted in a way that there are no free slots. So everything is explained, which means that everyone else that does not believe in what the populists suggest gets excluded immediately. So there are these 4 points, and I'd like to have a look at, as you can see, they are quite general, but still, given like 20 minutes of time, I'd like to show you what we are working on much more than explain what we've come to. So, first of all, I start with the second thing, because you, Elena, and you, Alexandra, you've already mentioned it. And there's obviously populism as we'd like to see it as a way of building integration and social cohesion, or the concept or the vision of social cohesion, or as a way of excluding the others. So it's not inclusion, it's exclusion. And obviously the result or the consequence of such politics would be based on the assumption that the nation state is something that can be seen as homogenized, as something solid, as something non-diverse, because as we all know, diversity is a kind of a very big threat to sort of sane society. So we'd like to discuss the concept of normativism, which would mean that there is this conviction that norms are basically not only dominant and necessary if you want to rule the country well, but also that they cannot be discussed. This is why both in the church and in the Polish state, there would be this concept of natural law. So something that cannot be discussed, something that's given for granted, something that's supposed to guarantee the order, in a way also something that's supposed to guarantee the meaning of life to the people, and I will come back to it in a minute. Obviously, there is also this, what we can see, what we can observe is a very interesting construction of public enemy as a figure that allows the real community of the real Poles to be integrated against some others. And this is super interesting, quite fascinating, because it's not only the elites and the LGBT and so on, but so many more groups, which also tend to be homogenized and solidified in a way. So we'd like to discuss whether this normativism, so centering the debate around the norms and this kind of obsession connected with obeying the norms, is something very typical for or something that strengthens the bond between the Catholic Church and the national state. An image, something that we've seen already, and I'm so happy that we've seen them already. This is the image that for me is a lovely illustration of neo-traditionalism. And as you can see, there's this poster that announces all of us to join the march for life and family. And I think it's great, and I'm very glad that you picked it up as well, because it shows that populism somehow gives us a shelter from all these disastrous threats such as LGBT, and even you can see the two thunders, which probably is a kind of prophecy before the women's strike started. So the norms, the way of seeing the social world and how the social world is defined would be around the norms, and these norms are not to be disputed. And this would be one of the propositions to be included in the debate about what populism is constructed around and from. There's also the sense of prophecy. And again, I'm very glad, Alexandra, that we discussed in details the question of the catastrophe in Smolensk. What we'd like to add, and this is also something that's very much included in the religious way of seeing things, is the concept of prophecy. So prophecy is an event that we had known that it was coming. Yeah. So in order for prophecies to be effective, to work, there needs to be a linear history. So what we are looking at today or nowadays in populism in Poland is a kind of mythologization of history and of the past, where the symbolic resources again are structured in a way to give legitimacy to the ruling power. So there was a prophecy, as you can see. And the notion of prophecy will be very important, very, very significant for us to explain a number of religious phenomena, which I'm going to focus on in a minute. So as I tried to mention, it might be, it might be said that that one of the powers of populism would be the goal of structuring the diversity of everyday experiences in the same way. Okay, so we could say that there are some kind of matrices, the kind of interpretation matrices, and we always talk about these people who are the core concept of every populism. So our idea could be that populism actually gives meaning to meaningless lives. How does this happen? Well, it happens in a very in a way which is very well known from let's call them grand narratives. It happens by contextualizing the everyday efforts, everyday sufferings of the people to the context of grand history. And Olena, just a minute or several minutes ago, she quoted a great, some of the very significant words, so to say, because she says that, she mentioned the quotation where, quote, the purpose of LGBT is to falsify and hide reality. So we'd like to argue that populism is a way of establishing a very different sense of ontology, so a sense of what is real. And this reality is basically based on the idea of common sense. So as if the populism would be saying, hey, the elites obviously could try to tempt you with some theories, but because we the people, we have the contact with the real life, unlike them, the common sense became a very central resource to measure and to valorize what is real, right? So, for instance, ideology is something not real, yeah? But populism somehow plays with the sense of everyday life, of everyday experience, and also there is a very strong message. There is a lot of common sense that we normal people share. Yeah. Now, again, what we are looking at in the project is the domain and the discourse of heritage. And this is because we would like to have a look, as I said, at the mythologization of the past, and especially at the figures of sacrifice and offering. So, for instance, the catastrophe, the plane catastrophe of Smolensk would be seen as a case of sacrifice and offering. So obviously we would have the case of heroization, but why do we need it? In other words, Alexandra did not ask this question, but probably the main question is, why did Lech Kaczyński and 90 and other 91 people die in the crash? And the answer of the
populace.
Oh, okay.
4 minutes. Sorry.
Okay, I'll speed up. Thanks. So our idea is that we would like to look at some figures that are embedded in the mythologies of Poland, with the sacrifice and offering and the heroes. So, okay, last 2 more pictures. I'd like to show you. Thank you. Yes, sorry. I'd like just to draw your attention to 2 more phenomena. One is the cult of ancestors, and something that we are looking at is is a wonderful place located in Warsaw. This is one of the places that we are analyzing and we are looking at, and this is really the case of a connection, of a very strong connection between the church and the state. Because there is this Polish pantheon, the place where the ancestors, the shared ancestors, are buried. And this is also the place that basically could be seen as a proof for the big connection between the church and the state. Now, I'm not going to focus on that, but it's a very promising research, because this is exactly where we can see a number of concepts that are so vital for the marriage between the church and the state. For instance, the notion of trust and faith. Okay, and then finally, another phenomenon that we are focusing on is the movement of the prophecy and prayer. And again, we are looking at the feudalism, but seen in a bit different way than our colleagues that deal with political sciences, because what we are looking at is how the feudalism in the structure of the queen, the king, the kingdom, and so on, is applied in language practices. So we are looking at those 2 phenomena. One is quite pre-apocalyptic movement of knights and the knighthood. As you can see, it bases and it corresponds with the Polish past. And it's one of the examples where we can see very clearly how the past is used and shaped as a symbolic resource. And now my last slide. What we are trying to look at and how we are trying to analyze the phenomenon or the phenomena connected with the church and state relations would be basically the ways in which the diversity is structured. Okay, so we'd like to have a look at how the norms become dominant and how the norms create fundaments for social integration, as it is said. But also, and this is really, I promise, the last thing that I'd like to say now, we'd like to see the dichotomies between, for instance, the everyday sorrows of people that are used and that are absolutely abused by the populism, and the context of the ultimate concern, so to say, so the eternal life. And this is basically where the main power of this marriage between the Polish state and the church comes from. The power is that these 2 elements are linked, the everyday and the eternal. And the space between them is the space where the game can be won. Okay, thank you.